He had grown up on the streets for so long that he couldn't even remember the last time he had a real home. Every day felt almost the same: cold mornings, long afternoons walking around to find something to eat, and nights spent trying to stay warm on whatever spot felt a little safer than the rest. He didn't complain. He didn't argue with anyone. He didn't even talk much. Life had taught him that surviving quietly was easier than asking for help and being turned away. He didn't blame anyone for where he ended up. Sometimes life simply pushed people in directions they never expected. He had lost the little family he had when he was still young. One thing happened after another: realness, moving from place to place. People promising help, but never coming back. And before he knew it, he was completely on his own. At first, he hoped someone would notice him. Someone would ask him if he needed a place to stay, but eventually, he stopped expecting anything from anyone. He learned to survive with small things: a leftover piece of bread from a bakery, a cup of tea someone didn't finish at a roadside stall, a generous shopkeeper who gave him some water. These little acts of kindness meant more to him than the people giving it realized. Most days, he didn't have enough to eat, but he never complained. He simply kept walking, kept searching, and kept hoping tomorrow might be slightly easier. His clothes told the story of his life. His shirt was old and had lost its color. His trousers were torn at the knees. His shoes were mismatched. One was too big, one was too small, but they still worked. When it rained, everything got soaked, and when the sun came out the next day, he waited under a tree for his clothes to dry. He didn't have anything extra to change into, but even in this difficult life, he had something special, something that kept him from feeling completely broken. Behind an old community center, where no one went anymore, stood a dusty piano. It was weathered, scratched, and missing a few keys. Some of the strings inside were loose. The top was covered in dirt. To anyone else, it looked like junk, something that should have been thrown away years ago. But to him, it was the most beautiful thing in the world the first time he saw it. He thought someone had left it there by mistake. A piano sitting outside, uncovered in the open air, didn't make sense. He walked around it slowly, afraid to touch it. He wondered who played it before, what kind of songs it once produced, and why it was abandoned this way. He stood there for a long time, just staring at it, thinking it must have meant something to someone once upon a time. Finally, he reached out and pressed one key gently. The sound was not perfect, but it wasn't broken either. It was soft, slightly out of tune, but still a real piano sound. For some reason, that little note made him feel something warm in his chest. He pressed another key, then another. Soon, he was running his fingers lightly across the entire keyboard, listening to each sound, curious and fascinated. He didn't know anything about music. He had never taken a lesson. He had never gone to any school long enough to learn instruments. But the piano didn't care about that. It didn't ask him if he had money or a proper home. It didn't judge him. It simply played whatever sound he created with his fingers. From that day on, he visited the piano every morning and every evening. It became his safe spot, the one place where he didn't feel like a kid from the streets. When he sat in front of the piano, he felt like he belonged somewhere. He started experimenting with different sounds. He pressed random keys at first just to see how they worked together. Slowly, he learned which notes made him feel calm, which ones made him feel sad, and which ones made his heart beat faster. He discovered combinations that sounded like rain, combinations that sounded like laughter, and combinations that made him think of memories he didn't talk about. He paid attention to everything. When he passed by shops playing songs on the radio, he tried to remember the tune and repeat it later on the piano. When he walked past a cafe and heard someone humming a melody, he stored it in his mind, waiting to try it again when he got to his piano. He didn't know the names of the notes or the chords, but he understood sound in a different way through feeling. Some people noticed him. At first, they thought it was unusual to see a boy who looked homeless sitting behind a piano every day. Some felt confused. Others didn't pay attention. But a few stopped and listened. One morning, an old man walked past and paused. He watched the boy silently for a long minute. The boy didn't see him because he was lost in the music. When he finally looked up, the old man smiled and said, "You've got something special, kid." The boy didn't know what to say, so he just nodded shyly. Another day, a couple walked by carrying groceries. They stopped when they heard the music. The woman whispered, "How can someone so young play like this?" They listened for a few minutes, left a small pastry next to him, and walked away quietly, still amazed. But the boy didn't play for others. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He played because it made him feel alive. When he pressed the keys, he forgot he was hungry. He forgot how cold the nights were. He forgot he had no family to look after him. Music became his shelter, his comfort, his friend. Even when he had nothing to eat, he never skipped his piano hours. Sometimes he played with tired hands. Sometimes he played while shivering from the weather. But he played with emotion every single time. The piano had become his voice in a world where no one listened to him otherwise. One evening, something unexpected happened. A volunteer from a nearby charity organization happened to walk past the abandoned community center. She wasn't supposed to take that route. She usually took the main road, but that day she took a shortcut. When she heard the piano playing, she stopped immediately. She thought someone must have left a radio on. But then she realized the sound was live. She followed the music and found the boy sitting at the piano, playing a soft, slow melody that sounded like a sad story being told without words. She froze. She had seen many street kids in her work, but none had ever played an instrument like this. She didn't say anything at first. She didn't want to distract him. She listened until he finished. When he looked up and saw her, he felt nervous, unsure if he was in trouble. The volunteer raised her hands gently and said, "Hey, don't stop. I was listening. You play beautifully." He looked down. Compliments made him uncomfortable. He wasn't used to hearing nice things about himself. She stepped closer and asked, "Who taught you?" "No one," he said quietly. "I just learned by listening." She couldn't believe it. "You've never had a lesson? Ever?" He shook his head. The volunteer took a deep breath. She knew she had found someone extraordinary. She had met talented kids before, but this boy was different. He didn't just play music, he felt it. Every note carried emotion. Every melody seemed like a piece of his story. She asked him if he would be willing to come to a small community event happening the next week. She explained that they needed someone to play something simple and warm, something that would bring people together. The boy didn't answer right away. He looked at the piano, then at the volunteer, then back at his own hands. Playing in front of a crowd scared him. He didn't even like being stared at by strangers when he played on the street. But the volunteer's voice was gentle. Something inside him told him to give it a try. He finally nodded. The volunteer smiled. "Good. Don't worry. Just be yourself. People will appreciate you." As she walked away, the boy sat in front of the piano for a long time. He wondered why she wanted him to play. He wondered if he was good enough. But then he placed his fingers on the keys again. The piano didn't judge him. It reminded him that music came from the heart, not from a perfect life. As the sun began to set, he continued practicing, letting the keys guide him through the evening. He didn't know what the community event would bring. He didn't know that his life was about to change. For him, it was just another day with the only friend he trusted, the old piano behind the abandoned building. But life had already started opening a new door for him. And soon, the world would discover a talent they never expected to find in a boy who grew up on the streets. When the day of the community event finally arrived, the boy didn't know what to expect. He had barely slept the night before. He spent hours wondering whether he should even go. Part of him wanted to disappear and pretend he never agreed to anything. He was used to playing alone, hidden behind the abandoned building, surrounded by silence and old bricks, not in front of a crowd. But the volunteer's words kept echoing in his mind. "Just be yourself. People will appreciate you." No one had ever said something like that to him before. Maybe, he thought, it wouldn't be so bad. Maybe he could give it a chance. He woke up early and walked to the small open-air event area. He didn't have nice clothes to wear, but he brushed off the dirt from his shirt and washed his face at a public tap. It was all he could do. He tried his best, and that was enough for him. When he arrived, People were setting up stalls, arranging chairs, hanging simple decorations, and testing microphones. It wasn't a fancy event, just a small gathering meant to bring neighbors together. There were children running around, vendors preparing food, and a group of elderly people chatting under a tree. It was lively, but still friendly. He stood at the edge, unsure where to go. The volunteer spotted him and walked over with a warm smile. "I'm glad you came," she said. "Come, I'll show you the piano." The stage had been set up using wooden planks. It wasn't big, but it was enough for one performer. A real piano, not the abandoned, broken one he was used to, stood in the center. It was shiny, clean, and perfectly tuned. The boy's eyes widened. He had never seen something so beautiful up close. He walked toward it slowly, almost afraid to touch it. The keys looked smooth and bright, nothing like the chipped and faded keys he practiced on every day. He placed his fingers lightly on them. The sound that came out felt warm and full, like the instrument itself was alive. "Try a few notes," the volunteer encouraged. He played a short melody, just to test the feel of the piano. The richness of the sound surprised him. It was like someone had taken the music that lived inside him and given it a clearer, stronger voice. "You're going to be amazing," she said sincerely. But he still felt nervous. He peeked at the audience gathering around. People were settling into chairs, chatting, laughing, and waiting for the program to start. He wondered what they would think of him. Would they judge him based on his appearance? Would they turn away if they found out he lived on the streets? He tried not to think too much. He reminded himself why he played music: because it made him feel safe. Because it helped him express things he couldn't say with words. Because it was the only thing that belonged to him completely. As the event began, performers went up one by one. Some kids danced to popular songs. A group of boys did a short play. A man played a flute piece. The crowd clapped for everyone. It all felt positive and welcoming. Finally, the volunteer stepped on stage with a microphone. "Our next performer," she said with a warm tone, "is someone very special. He learned music in a very unique way. And when I heard him playing, I felt something I can't explain. I hope you will too." The boy's heart pounded. He took a deep breath, then walked up the steps. For a moment, he stood in front of the piano, staring at the audience. He felt small, exposed, unsure. Some people whispered to each other. Others looked curious. A few children giggled, not out of rudeness, but because they didn't know what to expect from a boy they had never seen before. He sat down, placed his hands on his lap, and tried to steady his breathing. He remembered the abandoned piano. He remembered the quiet mornings, the cold evenings, the sound of the city behind him. He remembered how the music always came from the heart, not from fear. He closed his eyes, placed his fingers on the keys, and began to play. The first few notes were soft, almost shy, but then something deep inside him opened up, and the melody grew stronger. It wasn't a song from any book or lesson. It was a piece he had shaped on the street, something created from loneliness, hope, struggle, and dreams. Slowly, the entire audience fell silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Children stopped moving. Even people walking by paused to listen. The boy didn't see any of it because his eyes remained closed. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply releasing everything he had held inside for so long. The melody flowed like a story, one filled with sadness, but also beauty. It spoke of nights spent alone, mornings filled with uncertainty, and the small moments of kindness he received from strangers. It spoke of courage, strength, and the quiet belief that life could be more than survival. Some people felt tears in their eyes without even understanding why. It wasn't just music. They could feel the honesty behind it. The sound carried emotions that didn't need words. A middle-aged man in the audience leaned toward his wife and whispered, "Where did he learn that?" She shook her head, speechless. A group of teenagers, who had been talking loudly earlier, now sat frozen. An elderly woman wiped her eyes softly, whispering, "This boy has a gift."
How the more he played,
the deeper the room fell into his world. Even the smell of food from the nearby stalls seemed to fade. All anyone could focus on was the mysterious boy on stage, thin, tired, dressed in worn-out clothes, yet playing with the soul of someone who had lived 1,000 emotions. When he reached the final part of his piece, the music softened again like a gentle whisper. The last notes hung in the air for a moment, delicate and warm, before fading into silence. The boy opened his eyes slowly, unsure what to expect. For a second, the whole place stayed completely silent. It wasn't the kind of silence that came from boredom, it was the kind that came from being deeply moved. Everyone seemed to be absorbing what they had just heard. Then, someone in the back began to clap. Another followed. And suddenly, the entire audience rose to their feet, clapping louder and louder. It wasn't polite applause, it was emotional, grateful, filled with admiration. The boy stared in shock. He had never seen so many people stand for him. He had never heard applause meant for him. He didn't know what to do. He stood slowly and gave a small bow, unsure of the proper way to respond. He noticed a few people wiping their tears. Others smiled warmly at him. Some simply stared, amazed by what they had witnessed. After he left the stage, people began approaching him. A woman offered him a warm meal. A man gave him a scarf. A child handed him a small bun and said, "That was beautiful." He felt overwhelmed, but touched. But the most important moment came when a man walked up to him quietly. He looked like a teacher, calm, observant, thoughtful. He had watched the entire performance without blinking. "You didn't learn this from anyone, did you?" he asked gently. The boy shook his head. "I've been teaching music for many years," the man said. "And what you have? It's rare. Very rare." The boy stayed silent, not knowing how to respond. "You have a gift," the man continued. "You play from the heart. That's something even trained musicians struggle to do." The boy looked down, unsure if he should believe it. Then the man said something that almost didn't feel real. "If you want, I can teach you properly. You won't have to pay anything. You just have to show up and practice." The boy's eyes widened. He had never been offered something like this. A real chance? A real path? "Think about it," the man said. "I'll be here tomorrow. If you come, we'll start." As the event ended and the crowd slowly left, the boy stood alone for a moment, trying to understand everything that had happened. He had played in front of people for the first time. He had made them feel something. And now a teacher wanted to train him. He walked back to the abandoned piano behind the community center. He sat down and played a few quiet notes. They sounded different now, not because the piano had changed, but because his heart had, for the first time in a long time. He felt something he almost forgot existed. Hope. And he knew that tomorrow he would show up. Because maybe, just maybe, his unbelievable talent could finally lead him to a new life, one where he didn't just survive, but truly lived.